biochemical cycle. So, this is the biogeochemical cycle. Our biosphere contains all of the minerals, water, oxygen, nitrogen, carbon, and other chemical materials necessary for life. The biosphere is a closed system. This means nothing leaves the biosphere and nothing enters it. So, the first cycle that we're going to tackle is the water cycle. So, here it is.
When the sun heated the sea, the water will evaporate and rise into the air. And the water vapor cools and condenses to become droplets, which form clouds. If enough water condenses, the drops become heavy enough to fall to the sea as rain. The water in a form of rain will be back to the sea. And that is the water cycle.
So, that is the water cycle. And the water cycle has three major steps, which is the evaporation, condensation, and precipitation. So much for that. Let's go to the next cycle, which is the carbon-oxygen cycle.
Carbon-oxygen cycle. In the process of photosynthesis, atmospheric carbon is absorbed by the plants. This carbon is transferred from plants to the other animals feeding on them, and further moves up to the food chain. Respiration, digestion, and metabolism of plants and animals results in some transfer of carbon back to the atmosphere. Decaying plants produce carbon dioxide in fossil fuels, which is oil plus oil. And then carbon is released into the atmosphere when fossil fuel burns. And this is the carbon-oxygen cycle.
So that was the carbon-oxygen cycle. Next, we're going to discuss about the phosphorus cycle.
Phosphate-bearing rocks and marine bird droppings, known as guano, are mined for use in the manufacture of fertilizers and detergents. During weathering processes, phosphates are leached from sedimentary rocks and deposited into the soil or bodies of water. And then guano is washed by water into the ocean. Land and marine plants uptake phosphates from the soil or water. Animals uptake phosphorus by eating plants or plant-eating animals. And then bacteria decompose dead land and marine plants. The marine birds excrete phosphate-rich guano. Sedimentation involves the deposition of phosphate-rich materials in the sediments of marine environments, and they become buried and compacted into sedimentary rocks. And that is the phosphorus cycle.
So that was the phosphorus cycle. Next is the nitrogen cycle. So here it is.
Nitrogen cycle. A man-made process combining hydrogen and nitrogen in the presence of catalysts under great pressure and temperature is called atmospheric nitrogen. A type of nitrogen fertilizer precursor called ammonia is produced through the process of industrial fixation. Nitrogen is converted to ammonium by soil bacteria through a process called mineralization. Bacteria convert ammonium to nitrate in a sequence of steps called nitrification. Much of the nitrogen in soil is found in living and decaying plants and animal tissues. Plants use nitrate as a nutrient for growth. Nitrogen is a part of amino acid which make proteins. The nitrate is not used by plants and microorganisms is free to move with the soil water. This can result in leaching or movement of the nitrate to the deepest soil depths or to the groundwater. Under some conditions, nitrates in the soil are converted to nitrogen and nitrous oxide gas and released into the atmosphere. This process is called gentrification. And this is the nitrogen cycle.
So that was the nitrogen cycle. Our last cycle to be discussed will be the sulfur cycle. So here it is.
Hydrogen sulfide is released into the atmosphere by volcanic eruptions, hot springs, and the anaerobic decay or sulfur-containing biological materials in swamps, bogs, and tidal floods. Certain marine algae produce dimethyl sulfide, a volatile compound that enters the atmosphere as tiny droplets. Sulfur dioxide is released into the atmosphere by volcanoes and also forms when dimethyl sulfide reacts with the oxygen gas. Then sulfur dioxide reacts with atmospheric oxygen to produce sulfur dioxide. Some sulfuric dioxide reacts with tiny droplets of water to form sulfuric acids. Some sulfur oxides also react with ammonia to produce tiny particles of ammonium salts. And then the wind carry droplets of sulfuric and particles of sulfate salts which then fall to the earth in acid deposition. By adding sulfur compounds to the air, the use of fossil fuels increase the rate of acid deposition. Plants get sulfur by taking up ions of sulfate salts from the soil. Animals get sulfur by eating plants, and all living things release sulfur compounds when they decay. Decomposition releases sulfate salts which can be taken up by plants as well as gaseous hydrogen sulfide. and some hydrogen sulfide enters the atmosphere. But when decay occurs in an oxygen-free environment, anaerobic bacteria break down hydrogen sulfide and release sulfur gas. Oxygen-requiring bacteria can incorporate sulfur into sulfate salts, which can be taken up by plants and enter food chain once again. And that is the sulfur.
So that was the sulfur cycle. So that was the summary of biogeochemical cycles. Thank you.